Decoding Your Smile to Measure Engagement. I'm Tonya Hall for ZDNet and Tech Republic, and joining me is Dr. Carl Marci. He is a chief neuroscientist, Nielsen Consumer Neuroscience. Welcome, Dr. Marci.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us about your journey to Nielsen. You co-founded Interscope Research, isn't that correct?
That's correct. So I was doing academic research on the way patients and doctors and clinicians connect on an emotional level using physiologic measures. And along the way, someone said, hey, why don't you go over to the MIT Media Lab, which turns out to be a very entrepreneurial place. And I met a business student, and he asked an interesting question, which is, have you ever thought about measuring an audience as they watch a video to see how engaged they were, or to be able to predict how popular that video would be? And we started to do some pilot studies, and when he graduated, he called me up and said, do you want to start a company? I said, sure.
So what role does neuroscience play in media and market research today?
Sure. When we got started in 2006, this was a brand new field. And we were taking technologies from healthcare and academia and trying to apply them to marketing and media questions. And at the time, we had this sense that we were measuring, like I said, a form of engagement. Now, the question then becomes, what is that? Right. And so we have a neuroscience definition of engagement. It's attention to something that emotionally impacts you and leaves a memory trace. And so as we evolved and the field has evolved, we really have technologies that can capture each one of those. So we have technologies that can capture attention processing, we have technologies that can capture emotional processing, and technologies that can capture memory.
You've identified two emerging trends in the field of consumer neuroscience. Tell us about both of those.
Well, I think the biggest trend is we've moved over the last decade from what I call special occasion use. We got a really hard problem, let's call the brain scientist, to more everyday use. And I think there's two reasons for that. One is the world's become more complex, and I think the competition for engagement across the board has gotten higher. So all marketers need the best tools for the job. And I think the second reason is that we've been able to scale these technologies really across the world. So Nielsen has labs, 15 labs in 10 countries, and we're able to offer the same neuroscience tools and the same high quality in all of those countries. And for our global clients, that's really important.
What role does emotional engagement play in advertising and messaging?
Well, emotion's critical. Again, in 2006, we spent a lot of time talking about the importance of emotion. I think marketers had this idea that their job was to be an authority, to use rational arguments to persuade people to buy things. And I think we've seen a shift, and that shift is from authority to more authentic, from rational to emotional, and from persuaders to engagers. And that's because that's what the brain science tells us people want. They want an authentic message that resonates on an emotional level, that engages them. They don't want to be told what to do or what to buy. Number one. And then number two, the field of decision neuroscience has matured, and we understand that emotions play a critical role in navigating all kinds of decisions. In fact, play a role in every decision we make. And that means marketers have to understand the emotional states and responses of their target audience if they want to be successful.
You mentioned some of the technologies that you use to actually measure engagement. Tell us about those.
Sure. When we started over 10 years ago, most companies in the space were focused on one technology. So we were a biometrics company. We were measuring heart rate and skin conductance. There were other companies focused on EEG, electroencephalography, brain measures. And then there were companies doing eye tracking exclusively. What we learned over the last decade, Tonya, is that no one of these technologies has a monopoly on the truth. And so now, today, Nielsen has combined all of them. And so we like to say we use the best tool for the job. So EEG is really at the core. From a measure of consumers' brainwaves, we can pull out attention processing, emotional motivation, memory activation. But we also rely on things like eye tracking, so we can see where people are visually paying attention. And then things like facial coding. I saw you just smile there. And we have a technology that can tell us when the audience is smiling and when they're looking surprised or when they're frowning. And all of these really come together to help us measure the levels of emotional engagement and attention and memory activation in audiences to marketing materials of all sorts.
There are companies that specialize in building artificial intelligence to identify emotion and empathy. We talk to them all the time. What role do you see AI in creating emotion centered messaging?
Well, I think that's a great question. I mean, clearly, we're using sophisticated algorithms based on neuroscience to capture audiences' responses all the time. I think as artificial intelligence starts to evolve, it's going to play a role in the ways in which consumers engage with brands, just in the same way we saw how social media has changed how consumers respond to brands. The expectation now is that everyone has more access and the dialogue is two ways. And I think artificial intelligence is going to add a new dimension to all of that.
How do you test to see if emotional engagement was actually successful?
Well, it depends on what we're testing. So in the case of a video ad, we're going to look at the EEG response, which is going to give us a sense of how motivated people are as they are watching that ad second by second. Again, we're also going to measure their facial responses. So if we see uh, the ad is trying to portray humor and no one's smiling, that's a problem. And we'll give that feedback to our clients. And then we're also going to look at how, as a whole, the ad performs. And on an emotional level, we're going to compare that to our database of norms. So we'll be able to give you a sort of sense, are you the shortest of the midgets or tallest of the giants?
How much attention are you paying to potential privacy concerns for monitoring in the home?
Well, I think that's a great question, and it comes up fairly regularly. And I think that it's important to first say that there's no buy button in the brain, and we haven't been able to produce advertising that can take away free will. What we do is make ads a little more engaging so that they break through the clutter of the modern media landscape. Number one. Number two, all of our participants come to a central location, so we're not actually monitoring in the home. They sign a one-page consent, and they get paid to wear health monitors while they watch advertising. So there's no risk to our participants. And then we generalize from that small population to a larger population and make estimates about how engaging that ad's going to be. And it's really that simple. I think today, I have more concerns about some of the online privacy issues that we're all wrestling with than I do what consumer neuroscience is doing.
Dr. Carl Marci, Chief Neuroscientist at Nielsen Consumer Neuroscience. Thanks for shedding some light on the future of advertising and maybe making purchases with our smile. If somebody wants to connect with you, maybe they want to find out more about the research you're doing and the work that you've done, how can they do that?
Sure, you just put into your search engine Nielsen Consumer Neuroscience, and you can go right to our website, and we have contact information right there for everyone.
All right. Thank you so much. And if you guys want to find more of my interviews, you can do that right here on ZDNet or Tech Republic, or maybe go to my website, tonyahall.net. Thanks for watching.